this evening. Today is May 15th. The time is 5:29. I will call this Planning Commission meeting to order. Director Todd, can you have a roll call, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bennett is excused. Commissioner Daniels. Commissioner Esparza. Commissioner Harrison is also excused. Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Markowitz.
Present.
Commissioner Russell.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Present.
And Commissioner Udabi.
Present.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, you have a quorum present.
All right. Thank you, Director Todd. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there is one. As you will note, the agenda did indicate that your unfinished business item was tentative, and indeed, we have decided to remove it from the agenda this evening, and hopefully it will be ready for your first meeting in June.
Okay. So the only change would be to remove item A under unfinished business from the agenda.
That is correct.
All right. Looking for a motion to approve the agenda as revised, removing item A from unfinished business.
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair, and seconded Commissioner Russell. All in support of approving the amendments to the agenda indicate your support with the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. In opposition, sign of nay. There are no nays. The agenda has been approved as amended. Next, we have the meeting minutes for February 6, 2025. Looking for a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Do we have a second? Support. Thank you, Commissioner Esparza. All in support of approving the February 6, 2025 meeting minutes indicate your support with the sign of aye. 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 And opposition, sign of nay. There are no nays. The meeting minutes for February 6, 2025 have been approved. Next, we have a 5:15 presentation for the proposed institutional building adaptive reuse ordinance. Mr. Jeffrey and Mr. Moots, will you be assisting us with this item this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'll be myself and members of the Planning and Development Department.
Okay.
If we could introduce ourselves, Kimani Jeffrey of the CPC staff.
Ms. King?
Sure, absolutely. And good evening, commissioners. My name is Edwina King, and I am from the Planning and Development Department.
My name is Greg Moots. I'm also from the Planning and Development Department.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate my colleagues at the Planning and Development Department being here. We're going to give a presentation on an effort that we're working on jointly as PDD and CPC staffs. Just a little background on this effort. We initiated a working group back in 2019, I want to say. It was disrupted by the pandemic, but more recently we've resurrected it and are pushing forward and been moving along pretty successfully. As you see around the city, we have institutional buildings that have gone vacant. Many of those don't have viable uses these days. In 2011, the CPC and Historic Designation Advisory Board, then led by Dr. Bulger and Janice Chapman, Deputy Director of HDAP, led an effort for a school adaptive reuse ordinance. And that allowed for schools to be reused for 19 uses. So that's currently on the books. This is going to expand upon that, and we are going to share more information on what is being proposed and what we seek to do with this ordinance. With that being said, Ms. King, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before we start, and then we can pass the floor to Mr. Moots.
No, not at this time. It's just, this is, I won't steal Mr. Moots' thunder, so yes.
All right, we can, Mr. Moots, if you would like to go through the chair.
Sure. Through the chair, I'd like to begin our presentation on this exciting ordinance that we've been working on. Next slide, please. This is, in summary, we're looking to do text amendments to allow the reuse of various public, civic, and institutional buildings. This is a great example of Ladder 4 Wine Bar on Vinewood, a former fire station that was rehabilitated into a restaurant, but it had to go through a rezoning to do that. So this ordinance is looking to avoid that necessity for rezonings for a lot of these institutional buildings. We'll see the full list of what's eligible in a minute. But the challenge is that, as we know, many of these, churches, schools, libraries, et cetera, are in residential neighborhoods and hence are residentially zoned. Therefore, the reuse opportunities for them is quite limited. As Mr. Jeffrey said, there is a school building adaptive reuse ordinance, but it only applies to schools, and it only has 19 potential uses in it. So we're proposing to expand both the number of eligible uses as well as the number of future uses for these buildings. Next slide. Here's the full list of the uses that we are proposing. Later on at the end of this presentation, we have a couple other uses that were proposed as a part of the significant engagement that we've been doing. But these are what we've agreed to. These are the uses that we've shared with the public thus far. So if a building had any of these uses in its history, it could be eligible for this ordinance. And the in its history is important because some of these buildings have become have changed uses a couple times over the potentially 100 years or so since they were built. And sometimes, the use that they have become today has become a conforming use in residential, and therefore the building is not eligible for a BZA case or for anything else. So again, it is it's trapped, if you will, in the permitted residential uses, and we want to expand that. Next slide. Lots of good reasons for what we're doing, certainly. As most of us have seen, a lot of these buildings that have been reused over the years have been used for residential uses. So it creates new housing, it supports new residential efforts, new housing. It expedites investment in that this ordinance would remove the need for rezoning in many cases and thus remove the burden of the time and money that it takes and the risk, honestly, sometimes that it takes for the rezoning. Allows a large variety of potential uses for these buildings. As we know, it's challenging enough to use a lot of these, which is why they've been vacant for so long. So we want to make it as easy as possible, allow as many potential uses as possible that would fit with each building's and each neighborhood's unique character. Our goal is uses that fit within the day-to-day needs of the local residents. We'll look at the full list of uses later, but we're not looking to reuse these buildings for something that would create a huge destination that would not fit in the neighborhood, but rather something that helps the residents, also something that doesn't create traffic. It allows, we're hoping that the money that could go towards demolition would instead go towards reusing these buildings. And again, it supports neighborhood investment. We've all heard the narrative of all the investment is downtown, but there's former, institutional buildings obviously scattered throughout the whole city. So this is an ordinance that would really allow development throughout the city. And again, saving buildings that really form a core of the neighborhoods that really are a key. The headline on the right was from, I think, a November New York Times. Again, just talking about this as a challenge that obviously isn't unique to Detroit, but there's abandoned churches just as one institutional use all over that we're looking to keep, that we don't want to see disappear, certainly. Next slide. Next slide. We're just going to go through a couple examples of sample buildings that have been reused thus far. A former school that became apartments on Kirby, former police station on Gratiot that became offices. Next slide. A church that became an event space on Kercheval, a library that became an office on Gratiot. I do want to note that both of these were commercially zoned, so they would not be eligible under our ordinance, but they certainly are a great example of what is possible with some of these buildings. Next slide. Here's one that was just before the commission. Most of you will remember saying the Agnes Church had to be rezoned to SD1 to permit the mix of uses that they were proposing. Our ordinance would remove that need for rezoning and allow them just to go through a special land use hearing at Buildings and Safety for that residential cultural center and office uses in this building that clearly we all want to save, make it as easy as possible to save. Next slide. Another one that's been in the paper that we've seen, Transfiguration School, rehabbed into 19 low-income apartments. This was able to be done under the school building adaptive reuse ordinance, but our ordinance would have furthered this effort in that it would have reduced the parking requirements below what the ordinance would today. The school building adaptive reuse ordinance permitted the multifamily residential use, but we would also reduce the parking requirements for that reuse. Next slide. Another great example of, of buildings that have recently come into the city's inventory is some of these former PLD buildings. These are zoned, the examples in this picture are zoned R2 and R3. There was an article I just in the news, I think on Thursday or Friday about these. And again, they're neat buildings, something that really is, something we want to keep, buildings that have a lot of potential, a lot of character. But if you limit it to just the uses permitted in the R2 or R3 zone, the potential of reuse drops dramatically. So we have proposed to increase the number of uses for buildings like this. Next slide. One more is the corner store churches. If you look behind the yield sign, you can actually still see the display window on the building there. So this used to be a corner store. But now that it's become a part of a church and the church is a permitted use in the residential zoning district, this can never go back to being a corner store in the future. So our ordinance would permit, buildings like this where they have been a church in the past, or again, a permitted use to again be used for a retail store, something that would serve the residential character, that would serve the residents of the neighborhood. Next slide. Here's another great example that was before you a couple years ago, the rezoning for Higginbotham School. This had to be rezoned because of the new residential on the site. The school building adaptive reuse ordinance permitted the residential in the existing school, but they had to do the rezoning for that new construction, that area outlined in yellow, to permit the greater use of this site. Next slide. Another similar recent example is the Lewis College of Business rezoning. Again, they had to rezone from R1 to R3 to permit the new residential development. And our ordinance would permit this type of development without a rezoning. And also this was not eligible for the school building adaptive reuse ordinance because this is an educational institution, a former college, if you will, instead of a former K through 12 school. Next slide. And now my friend and colleague, Mr. Jeffrey, will take over.
Thank you, Mr. Moots. And so the list that you have before you is a snapshot of some of the proposed uses that are included in this ordinance. So we're proposing to allow for 50 new conditional uses that would be newly permissible and eligible for any of those building typologies that Mr. Moots just mentioned. If you existed as those, such as a church, a school, library, fire, police station, you will be eligible to now transition to one of these new uses. So this is to give you a snapshot. We have the full list at the end of the presentation, but you see allows apartments and things such as dance, art, cooking, schools, commercial uses, and retail, as well as some small-scale manufacturing uses. I do want to note, before I move on, that all of these, according to the ordinance as it's drafted, would be permissible as a conditional use, which means they have to have a special land use hearing at the Buildings and Safety Department. So that's very important because it still gives communities a say in the process. It makes the process easier, but still gives people a way that they can chime in on what's being proposed in their neighborhood. So that's very important, and we thought it was necessary to include that. So how do we come to these uses? Sometimes we get questions about, why isn't this included or why isn't that particular use included? Well, we use these guiding principles as we had our working group working to select the uses that you see before you today. And those guiding principles were that, the uses we chose would add to the vibrancy of the neighborhood. A lot of times we hear many different complaints about, people's day-to-day needs not being able to be met through the retail or the services that are in their community. So the uses that we chose are aimed at trying to meet and fulfill those day-to-day needs and services for that particular neighborhood. We were choosing uses to try to spur employment opportunities in those particular neighborhoods, but we tried to choose the uses in a way such that it doesn't become a regional draw. So we're not trying to draw people from across the state or across, from outside of the city to these places. They're not meant to be destination spots, but they were chosen, generally speaking, to try to spur employment and serve the day-to-day needs of those specific communities. And then we also tried to make sure that the uses that were chosen wouldn't create undue traffic burden on that particular neighborhood. And lastly, again, it requires a SLU hearing, so it still gives community a chance to weigh in on what's being proposed at the time that projects come before the city. Other provisions in the ordinance include incentives. So those are parking incentives as well as loading reduction incentives. So a lot of times what we hear from the development community is that parking ratios as they are in the ordinance can be a burden to getting the project done. Every parking space has a cost associated. So typically one parking space to develop that might cost between $8,000 to $20,000, depending on where you are in the city. So that's a huge price tag associated with one parking space. Now, multiply that times whatever that ratio that's required for your particular use, and it could add up and become an impediment to buildings being reused and redeveloped. So to incentivize this more, we reduced the parking requirements by 50% and also the loading requirements. Obviously, these buildings that we're aiming at are already built, so they are what they are. So there's loading requirements, the spaces that you use to offload trucks for materials or whatever the case may be. We reduced that by 50% because sometimes these buildings are landlocked. They don't have the opportunity to create new loading space, so we wanted to reduce that to also incentivize these projects being taken on. But also to make sure that we're achieving what we're trying to induce, we require that 75% of the building be retained. So in the past, we've had sometimes where we might see someone's, knock down the majority of the building, keep the front facade and call it preservation. Well, they wouldn't be able to do that in this case because you have to retain 75% of the building to be eligible for all of the benefits of the ordinance. Tactical preservation is the incremental or partial reuse of existing buildings. And a lot of times these buildings have, exorbitant costs that are required to make them viable, to bring them back online. And so tactical preservation is something that's already being done in the city by the Buildings and Safety Department. And it allows for certain spaces within the building to incrementally be reutilized one space at a time. So 25% of the building might be used. Then, as you scale up, then you can go to 50% of the building being used. So the buildings department creatively works with a developer to make sure that they can do this safely, where maybe you don't have to sprinkle the entire building, or you might be able to mothball certain parts of the building until you have enough capital to reutilize the entire building. So it's happening now. Michigan Central Station is a good example of that being in play. And so while it's already happening, we wanted to codify this so that as the administration changes, staffs change, directors change, we want to make sure that this is something that can live on. And so we want to codify the terminology, the definition of this, and also the incentives that are permissible through this ordinance, with the parking and loading reductions being applied to this. So that's why we're putting it in zoning, although many of the components of it will be building code issues, as I mentioned before, like sprinkling and those types of things. So that's why this is in the ordinance as we are proposing. So what's the bottom line? Ultimately, as we look at this is how we've been speaking to, to communities about this as we've gone on a road show to present this to neighborhoods across the city. The institutional buildings are the anchors of these neighborhoods around the city of Detroit. This is Alexander McComb Elementary. This is a snapshot of what that community looked like in 2009. It was a pretty stable community. But we see that as these anchors deteriorate, as these anchors go, these institutional buildings in the neighborhoods, so goes the neighborhood. So you can see how the neighborhood declines as that central part of the neighborhood, that institutional school, declined. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to do what we can legislatively to support the reuse of these buildings by allowing them to be adaptively reused in new ways. And so as we're going around the city, some of the public engagement that we've gotten, we've talked to city council members, we had a developer focus group with architects and developers on that group, members such as Reed and other developers and architects that have taken on these projects in the past, and they were pretty excited about this. That actually kind of gave us more momentum to keep, to move it forward. If it was something that we thought or they thought wouldn't be beneficial, then we would have stopped, hit the brakes, and try to revamp it to see if it was anything that we could do to improve it. But they were pretty ecstatic about this. We've also talked to the DPSCD management, their real estate division. They're pretty excited. We actually talked to them about a week and a half ago. They were pretty excited. We've gone to the DON meetings, the D4, D6, D2 meetings so far, and we also went to their citywide meeting, we've presented at the D2 City Council Member Callaway meeting, her district meeting. We've also presented at a real estate conference and also sent out a mailing to private owners of these buildings, so churches and institutional building owners to solicit their feedback. So far, we've heard astounding positive feedback so far. Most of it's been supportive. Out of all of the meetings that we've had, I believe we received one comment that had concerns or possible opposition. And so we've had a meeting with that particular person, but out of all of the meetings so far, we've received one person that is opposed, and a large majority has been very supportive of this effort. And then lastly, and my colleague, Mr. Moose, can also weigh in on this. These are just some of the suggestions that we've heard from the engagement that people, as it relates to buildings that qualify for this ordinance, people wanted to see these types of buildings added, that hospitals could be reused, that funeral homes or mortuaries could be eligible buildings to be reused and take advantage of this ordinance, and also child caring institutions. So that's what we've heard as we've been on the road. And then also we heard one person had feedback that they wanted to see, and I believe this is from our developer focus group. One person wanted to see theaters being added as a use that you can transition to. So out of those 50 uses that we talked about that would be newly permissible to reuse a building for, they want to see theaters added to that use. That's one we wanted to bring before the commission and get your feedback on. We had some back and forth about that, some pros, some cons, so we want to get more discussion on that particular one. And lastly, I would say that this is just a quick recap. Again, what would this apply to? This would apply to buildings that have any time in the past had a permit for a school, a library, a fire or police station, a post office, courthouse, religious building, including convents and residential religious buildings, and also utility buildings such as the DTE stations and so forth. So if a building has existed as any of those in the past, they will be eligible to utilize this ordinance. It will add commercial options for these buildings. So generally speaking, these buildings are in the R1 and R2 districts, and so this will give them opportunity to do something other than a single or two-family house, which they are restricted to today. Additionally, this would add the tactical preservation pathway that I mentioned. So allowing people to incrementally reuse buildings. It will reduce parking and loading requirements, and then also allow for new construction on properties, on parcels that have a building that's eligible for the adaptive reuse. So in general, many of these schools have very large play lots or playgrounds that are not being utilized or underutilized. So this would allow for the addition of new housing. But again, I want to stress that, again, community still gets a say in how this plays out, because there will be a public hearing, which people in proximity to these structures will be invited, and those public hearings are held at the Buildings and Safety Department, and the community's feedback is taken very strongly into consideration. And lastly, we're just on a road show right now. We still have some meetings left, but this is sort of what we're doing. We wanted to give an introductory presentation. If all goes well, if there's support from this honorable body, we might be looking to bring this back in June for a public hearing to hear additional feedback from the community. But that's the current trajectory we're on, unless we hit a roadblock. And these are this is the list of the last meetings that we have coming up. So we've gotten up to the D2 meeting that we had just on Tuesday. And so we have D1, D7, D3, and D5 coming up. And also we may have some council members that additionally want us to meet with them, as we've heard some interest as we've talked to them one-on-one so far. So with that being said, this is how, for the public's sake, this is how you will reach us, either myself or Mr. Moots. And then we also have a website with all of this information at detroitmi.gov/adaptive reuse. With that being said, through you, Mr. Chair, I want to again give the floor to Ms. King if she has any closing comments.
Sure, absolutely. And so similar to what my colleague, Mr. Moots said, or Greg Moots said, when you work, especially if you work for the city in various capacities, you hear the narrative. Okay, we see downtown, midtown, we'll even throw in Corktown, but what about the rest of the town? This ordinance addresses that in a way that, especially when you talk about anchor buildings such as schools and other types of uses, and depending on where you live, maybe that school is sitting vacant, and you get the calls from residents in the community. What are you going to do about this building? This ordinance allows for us to have that flexibility for, whether you're a developer that's looking to do business in the city, whether you're a resident that, I've even heard from seniors who are looking to downsize and they would love to, stay in the community that they currently live, but maybe not have a house as large. This allows for, to look at ways to address, some of the concerns that residents may have about housing, looking at mixed use and basically making our communities viable again especially in certain parts of the city. And so again, similar to what was said earlier, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And I haven't seen anything like that in a long time when it comes to ordinances specifically addressing zoning. And so we're all very excited about this, similar to members of the community. And we thank you for your time, commissioners.
And through the chair, I believe Mr. Moots raised his hand if it's okay for him to say.
Yes, please. Mr. Moots?
Yeah, if I could think, I just wanted to, through the chair, I did want to thank the other members of the working group, the interdepartmental working group. We've been working with the Historic Designation Advisory Board as well as Historic District Commission staff on this. Several years ago, the Historic District Commission staff, did a extensive review of the vacant schools in the city and did a lot of work on that. So some of this builds on the work that they did in their report that they did. So I wanted to thank our other team members, and then also just add a little bit more about that potential theater use. Excuse me, that was brought up because many of these schools have auditoriums. So one of the developers suggested that they would like to be able to reuse that auditorium as a theater, as an amenity for the community. So just wanted to give a little more flesh on the bones to that request. And we picked the 150 seats because that's the size limit that's either in SD1 or SD2 today. But obviously we want to get the feedback of of the commissioners on that or any other topic that you've seen in this ordinance. So we thank you very much and are happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you. And as I've said it before, I enjoy proactive planning. It sounds like this would be a great ordinance and a great opportunity for residents and a lot of property owners in the city. So I guess we can start with questioners. I'll go on my left, Commissioner Lewis, and then Commissioner Esparza.
I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that this adaptive reuse ordinance would be excellent for neighborhoods in the city. I do have two questions. Is one of our council members presenting this ordinance? Who's presenting the ordinance?
So this is an initiative of the CPC and the PDD. So these are our departments, Planning and Development, City Planning Commission, proposing this ordinance. We have gotten interest from several council members to sponsor it. So we're working those details out now. But this is an initiative of these two departments.
Okay, but a council person will be sponsoring it.
So far, there's at least 4 or 5 council members that have expressed interest in sponsoring.
Okay, and my other question has to do with the master plan of policies. Is it Smith Group? Are they the ones working on that? Have they chimed in at all in terms of how this fits in with Detroit's future? How the various changes that you're proposing in the ordinance fits in with what their meetings when the community have indicated the people are looking for?
So I wouldn't say Smith Group directly, but we do work closely with Julie and Deputy Director Darrell Byrne, and they are very much aware that they've been in these presentations with us as we presented to council members. So they are very much aware. We haven't specifically had taken it through a run-through with the Smith Group. So
Well, maybe not the Smith Group, but whomever in the director's department that would have knowledge of where the Smith Group is going with the master plan of policies to ensure that this ordinance is reflective of that.
Yes. So through the chair, the staff that from the Planning and Development Department that are leading the master plan effort are very intricately involved in this, or have been in the presentations and are very much aware of this effort and supportive.
Okay, thank
Yeah, and I
you.
think it's also, go on, I'm sorry.
Mr. Moots, if you had something to add, that's...
Yeah, through the chair, I just wanted to add that, neighborhood viability, development within the neighborhood certainly fits the master plan's vision. On a the master plan, as you know, is a broader brush document instead of a parcel by parcel document, but certainly neighborhood revitalization is very much consistent with, the master plan's vision, and obviously very much consistent with what we've heard at meetings on this and master plan engagement and everything else. So, we can certainly say that this is generally consistent with the master plan is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 West Mac designated as institutional or commercial for the school or church there. We can't really say, but certainly, the reuse of buildings and not creating more, vacant teeth in the city's smile, if you will, in the streets, in the streetscape is consistent with the policies that we anticipate being forthcoming.
Yes, excellent, Mr. Moots. I think what I'm speaking to is this, the discussion was that these buildings would be this ordinance would create various adaptive reuses for these buildings. And I know that the master plan doesn't get down into the weeds, but this ordinance will. And what I'm hoping is that what the consultant has found in the communities in terms of what the communities desire to see is made a part, like you talked about, theaters. If maybe maybe they found that's something that the community, entertainment is something that the community wants. I don't know, but that's what I'm speaking to in terms of the master plan on a larger scale. And we don't have to keep talking it over. I just wanted to explain what I was trying to say. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Esparza.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is outstanding work, so thank you. I would encourage and support, a public hearing before the body as early as June. And also your other revisions or provisions that addresses the possibility of parking 50%. Can you explain who actually is involved with those reviews, decisions, or revisions? Which department?
Through the chair, and my colleague, Mr. Moose, can add on to this if he has anything. But the Buildings and Safety Department would typically review this. Sometimes the Planning and Development Department will review, I guess, depending on whether there's a design review component, if somebody's asking for city incentives. Mr. Moose, would you agree with that, or would you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, through the chair to Commissioner Esparza, this is just a straight reduction. There would be no review. If you are doing a use that requires one space per 400 in a former school, church, library, whatever, you would now have to provide one space per 800 square feet. So it's just math, a 50% reduction per use below what the ordinance would require today. So there wouldn't be a review, there wouldn't be a determination is 12 or 13 or 14 spaces, the correct. This would just be straight math, just like we use if you're on a traditional Main Street overlay, or if you're in an SD1, or if you're adjacent to high frequency transit corridor. There's a significant number of provisions in the ordinance today that say if you're doing this, then reduce parking by that. And this would just be one more example of that.
Yes, so through the chair. So if you Buildings and Safety would just be looking to confirm that, you're eligible, and then they would give you the reduction.
Yeah, it's not subjective.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to give that a little more thought and maybe provide some feedback. But overall, I think this is great work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Esparza. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm so excited that this is coming before us. As you know, historic preservation is deeply important to me. I had a question. I see that we're doing public engagement. What specific engagement have we done with developers? I'm seeing this provision to encourage preservation by requiring, 75% of the building to be retained. Like, that sounds great. I want to do that. But a lot of buildings are in a condition that 75% just isn't existing anymore. But we still want to have these rehabilitated with anything that's left. Can you speak to that for me, please?
Through the chair to Commissioner Markowitz, or Vice Chair Markowitz. So we started off with a developer focus group. So I believe we have between 20 to 30 developers and architects on that meeting. People that range from McIntosh Porras and Associates to developers from Reed, which they represent over 100 minority developers. So in a lot, we selected the architects and developers that we reached out to. Largely have played a part in these types of projects in the past. And we can also get you a list if you'd be interested. But that's where we started off, and we wanted to hear from them first before we took it to the public to make sure that it was something that they could actually use or thought might be helpful for the developer community. So we didn't hear any negative feedback about that percentage, but I don't know if there would be from others. But that particular group, which was a wide range, didn't seem to have any issue with it. Okay. thank you for that feedback.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And then if I could just kind of add and follow up, I recall in some other situations we have like administrative variances, 10, 15% or something like that. So I don't know if maybe in addition to that 75, because I would hate for a building to be like right there and they only need, 200 or 300 square feet or something. And that's the line, right? I don't know if we can add a 5 or a 10% administrative variance that staff has the discretion to use or something like that.
So generally speaking, through the chair, generally speaking, the Buildings and Safety Department has a 10% administrative adjustment, and unless I'm wrong, that's for any numerical standard in the ordinance, so that would be applicable to this. Mr. Moots, would you agree with that, or what's your take on that? That's a good point.
Through the chair, I believe it would be. We'd have to read the ordinance to make sure that the administrative adjustment provision does apply to numerical standards in Article 12. I'm pretty sure it does, as Mr. Jeffrey said, but we can certainly double check that. I believe it does apply to numerical standards in Article 12 and then in Article 13, which is parking.
Okay.
But we can check before your next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. And then does this apply to historic buildings at all? Like if there are buildings that are designated historic that might have some adaptive challenges?
To you, Mr. Chair, this would not be specific to or be relevant to any historic designation on a building.
Okay.
It's specific to what they've been used as in the past or what permit they've had in the past.
Okay. Got you. And then with parking, I like the idea of making it more accessible or requiring less parking. But I guess on the other side, I'm thinking about the challenges to those residents over in the Avenue of Fashion when we brought all that back online, and a lot of residents were parking kind of into the residential, and it started to cause a few issues. So my concern is if we do reduce the parking, and then there are situations that now they're having excess parking because we allowed something that probably would not have made it because of parking. I don't know if there should be some form of cap. So we don't have that issue because these may be in the residential neighborhoods. I think parking is maybe more of a concern to residents, while on the developer side, they want less parking so they could do it. So I think we just need to make sure there's a bit more control on the cap side, on the high side.
And through the chair, I think that's something we've discussed a lot because we hear that concern throughout the neighborhoods. That's a part of why we incorporated the SLU hearing so that discussion can happen. I think to the point that you raised, we need to just revisit that discussion to make sure that if through that special land use hearing something of that nature is discovered that, this is going to create a burden, that the Buildings and Safety Department has some flexibility to scale up, that they have, a say. And generally speaking, they should have a say because a special land use hearing they do have the authority to add conditions that you do A, B, and C in order to receive the permit. Mm-hmm. So we'll just revisit that to make sure that would be the case, even with the language with the 50% reduction, just to legally that they will still have that authority to increase to control that. But I think that's a great point.
And then I have just two more minor comments. I noticed in the presentation it said it would help reduce annual demolition. And that was like a bullet. It said reduce annual demolition.
Yep. Through the chair, I believe that's just more so getting at, many times at our city council hearings or even maybe here during public comment, we often hear people complaining about, some of the demolition that's happening to buildings that, there's a belief could be saved. And so I believe that bullet point is just taking aim at or trying to address that concern that instead of our first response being to demo buildings, now we're trying to save them. So that's the general, that's the gist of what we were trying to get at with that bullet.
Okay, and that makes total sense. And then my last comment before I pass it down the line here is in addition to the theater, is there a possibility like maybe small indoor fitness? I've seen like small mini gyms or yoga studios or kind of small things like that. Would those be permitted?
Through the chair, I believe that is captured in our list. Actually, I don't believe I did show you the full list. So let me bring that up of uses that would be newly permissible. So this is the full list of what would be permissible. Can you all see? I don't know if you can see that. Okay. So, and you said fitness gym, so I believe that would fall under.
Yeah, like interior recreation. I see recreation, interior, indoor, commercial, and health club in the upper right use.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Ooh, I got good vision. Okay. Well, that's awesome. Okay, good.
I'll leave that up for a second.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Jeffrey. That's all my questions. Commissioner Russell?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I think that this is beautiful on so many different levels. I think the fact that two departments are working together to come up with something that's so thoughtful and insightful, you all are really to be commended for what you're doing. I liked what Ms. King said about that this is going to allow a lot of development, not just downtown and midtown, because it's everywhere. And, so you all are a prime example of public servants going to town. And, and I think it's going to make it possible for any size developer to renovate projects. And it's going to a lot more. We have a lot of good things to come because of such good work from you all. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell. Commissioner Udabi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for this presentation. I'm glad all of the other commissioners so far have echoed it. I think that for me, one of the most exciting things about the city of Detroit was seeing how many beautiful or older buildings have been converted into new things. That has felt always so exciting to me. So to think of this being part of the ordinance and streamlining the process for people to reuse buildings, to your point, instead of a first inclination of trying to just raise them, is really wonderful. So I really love this idea. One of my questions is, I'm curious, the cost and time difference between the special land use hearing and the rezoning, because I do think, from what I understand, the SLU is easier for places to get through, but I'd love to just hear the delineation between the two really quickly.
Sure. So there are soft and hard costs, some that we may not have calculations for, but some of the initial costs for a rezoning right now, I believe we're charging $1,500 for a rezoning. A special land use hearing versus a special land use hearing, which would be the new process, is about between $1,100 to $1,200. Rezoning requires, it's a minimum of 4 to 6 months, but even after it leaves this body, there's reviews that have to happen at the city engineering department, at the law department, and depending on capacity at the time, those, and then also then go to council, and depends also on their agenda and what how heavy that is. So it could sometimes even get up to a year. Some we've had some ordinances that have even after it leaves here, might have another 6 months to go or more sometimes, depending on the ordinance and the staff capacity. So that time frame versus the new time frame under this, which would be the special land use hearing, generally it could be about 3 to 4 months. So you could save a great deal of time through this new process.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I love having the idea of still having a special land use hearing just to make sure the surrounding residents and property owners feel aligned with the new use of it. I think that's really wonderful. And then my final question is, you have the list of what buildings are allowed to be reused in this ordinance, but I'm curious about adding vacant homes that the land bank has. Was that considered at all?
That was not considered from my recollections in our work group discussions. Is there something that you may be thinking that you want us to explore?
Yeah, I don't know if this is opening a can of worms, but I do know that the land bank has quite a bit of properties that have vacant and varying degrees of dilapidated homes on it. I don't know if the land bank also has commercial properties or other things, but I am curious about adding it to this ordinance to ease the ability for redevelopment of these properties that are currently not being used. I understand maybe the flip side of, okay, well, if it's a home, it's probably like in the middle of a residential space. And so that could probably lead to some, I don't know, I don't want a restaurant next to me, or like I don't want insert use next to me. But I also know that there are some homes that are in between a lot of vacant land, or like on the edge of some bigger thoroughfares or something like that. So I'd be curious about thinking that through more if any other commissioners have thoughts about it. But in conclusion, I love this.
Okay.
I'm so excited about it. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dobby. Commissioner Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great presentation, as always. You guys do a top shelf job, the whole department. My question is, are there any incentives going to be offered or tax breaks for developers to may take one of these buildings and try to bring it back to life, if you will?
So that's actually a great question that's come up several times. So there won't be any new incentives specific to this ordinance, but there are incentives available. So, and when I say that, I mean the incentives that are available for other projects in the city will also be available for this. So since this has come up a lot in in our engagement as we go through communities, as we talk to council members, we actually added those incentives to the website so that people can know where to go to inquire about them, and also know what those incentives are. So generally, those would be things such as the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, what we call the OPRA, the Commercial Rehabilitation Act, or CRA, PA 210, or Neighborhood Enterprise Zone rehab certificate. That allows for people to get all of those either freeze or allow reductions in taxes for a specified amount of time. And then there's other incentives such as brownfields and other things like that, but those are some of the basic incentives that people generally might use for these types of projects, as well as Motor City Match and other grants and awards that might be available, and state incentives as well. So we've put those resources on the website so that people know how to access them. So I don't know if that answers your question fully.
Yeah, pretty much. One more thing. Lost my train of thought. So is there a complete list of all these properties throughout the entire city, or did you just select a few?
Through the chair to Commissioner Daniels, there is not, I wouldn't say that there is a complete list of all of these properties. There is an accessible list of the schools, and we've tried to track down majority of the churches. Mr. Moots sent a mailing to property owners that generally fall within these descriptions. I don't know that it's infallible, but I believe it's fairly close to complete. Mr. Moots, would you want to chime in on that?
Sure, through the chair. Yeah, we've looked at the assessor's records and looked at where they show a building, where the building type would be school or religious institution, and where it was then privately owned instead of, like obviously a DPS owned school or something like that. So we tried to take out, it was manual, so certainly not 100%, but, take out churches owned by churches or schools owned by schools, and then, sent a letter to the remainder. I want to say it was 110, 120 or so mailings that we did. Now, those are properties, it might be, 1,000, literally 1,000 square foot building, a very, very small corner church or something like that, up to something larger. So of all scale and things like that. But we came up with about 110. And then there's obviously, a few of those, the utility buildings. We don't have a full list of that. We know which ones used to be, public lighting department and now has come into the city inventory, because some of those are being actively marketed right now, actually. But several of those would be on the city list, or, the former fire station. But we certainly don't have a list in one place of all the buildings that would be eligible for this, because to some extent, honestly, it's a bit fluid, especially if you take into account, any building that used to be used as a church or a school, there's some movement around those. We drive past the big ones, but there's a lot of small ones. When we looked at the list of church buildings, the range in size was, from, literally 1,000 feet to 150 or 180,000 square feet. So, this really would affect properties of all size all around the city. So it really is, if someone's interested in a building that used to be that, this ordinance would apply regardless of ownership. They could come to Buildings and Safety and take advantage of it. That's what we're hoping for.
And through the chair, one data point that we do have is generally there's approximately 82 school buildings. And I think 30 of those are owned, or 39 of those approximately are owned by the city, and about 30 of those are owned by DPSCD, and then others are privately owned.
Question, how many of the school buildings were wrong? I know a few years ago they did a swap or something, right? But the school system signed the buildings over to the city?
Yes, some of those were transferred over to the city, yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Daniels. So, Mr. Jeffrey, I think you got a lot of good comment from the members of the board here. Can you give just a brief kind of next steps and what we can expect to kind of close us out here?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I want to make sure, I know that we have one outstanding thing. I know we need to revisit the 75% retention. And there was one other, I believe it was a question, and I didn't catch it because we kept moving, but I believe you had an item that you wanted us to check on.
The 75% for parking.
The parking. Yeah. So we'll revisit the parking just to confirm that Buildings and Safety would have some latitude in scaling the parking requirement up if necessary, if they find it necessary during the hearings. I think that was the only other item that I heard, unless there's anything else.
I think that's it.
Okay, so we will revisit those, have more conversation on it, and we look to come back for a public hearing, likely for the second meeting in June, as long as our continued community engagement goes as well as it's been going, and we don't run into anything that is unexpected. But we'll come back for a public hearing, more than likely in June, and look to hear additional comment from the public.
Is that good with you, Commissioner Esparza? All right. Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey.
Thank you all. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right. Moving forward, we have our 6 p.m. Discussion and presentation. This is a request of the Housing and Revitalization Department, HRD, to modify and review the process for public facility rehabilitation, the PFR component of the CDBG and NOFA program. Whenever. Let's see, who will be assisting us this evening? Director Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly joined by the Director of HRD, Julie Schneider, as well as Associate Director Rebecca LeBeau, And we also have Mr. Gulak online, I believe. And the request and discussion that is before you is an outcome from the meetings of your special committee, as the committee, of course, has been dealing with your committee structure and particular questions around the former Citizens Review Committee and its relationship to the Community Development Block Grant Program, Neighborhood Opportunity Fund component in particular. It facilitated the discussion that is now formally coming before you as a request from HRD.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Do I need to introduce myself? I need to introduce myself for the record. Julie Schneider, Director of the Housing and Revitalization Department.
Welcome.
Good evening. Rebecca LeBeau, Housing and Revitalization Department.
Thank you. Welcome. Whenever you're ready.
Good evening to the commission. So the Public Facility Rehabilitation Program is a program that's been operated by the Housing and Revitalization Department, and before that, the Planning and Development Department, prior to 2015, that is, to provide community development block grant funding to nonprofit agencies that have public serving facilities. Public serving meaning they're open to everyone that receives services through those agencies. As a user of public funds, there are certain requirements, especially related to accessibility, that are required to be maintained, as well as being able to maintain your building with the code of the City of Detroit. So we provide grants to organizations to help them improve their facilities. When I became the director in 2021, within maybe several weeks of becoming the director of the department, we came before this body to request approval of items that had applied, some different developments that had applied for and been recommended for approval. I think during that discussion and then afterwards, it kind of occurred to me and was clear to me that some of the processes that we were using to award funds to small organizations and the requirements of community development block grant dollars related to environmental review and other requirements were relatively challenging for small organizations to manage. And as a result, we were seeing projects that were awarded sit in queue for often several years, sometimes returning money back to us because the project that they scoped when they came for award changed and was very different after they got contractors under contract and further scoped the project. And so we set out to identify ways that we could address those specific issues. So how could we help nonprofits manage construction projects better, set them up for success, and also not be awarding dollars and have them not being spent for several years. As community development block grant dollars have several funding deadlines that we're responsible for managing, and the dollars must be spent on a certain time. So with the American Rescue Plan Act, we were able to utilize some of those dollars to test out some different approaches, and using that, we have conceptualized a new version of the program that we wanted to bring to this commission tonight to talk through what that would look like and how we're asking for commission involvement in the future. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Rebecca LeBeau, who's HRD's Chief Development and Investment Officer for the department.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to talk through a brief presentation here and break down a little bit of the background of both the program and then the funding source because they are intertwined and it's important to understand them both. So this next slide provides just a brief introduction to the Community Development Block Grant Program. This is a HUD grant program of which the city is an entitlement grantee, so we receive an annual allocation. And the purpose of the funds is to serve low to moderate income persons. And so, as Director Schneider described, this program is intended to serve facilities out of which nonprofits operate that serve those low to moderate income residents. So the PFR program, as we call it, or Public Facility Rehab, it is distinct from the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund in what it does. And in the past, they have been presented together as both programs run under CDBG. But tonight we're focusing on PFR, so I'll provide a little bit more context about this program. So HRD operates this, as Director Schneider described, to help nonprofits better serve their residents by improving their facilities, rehabilitating the physical structures, and in some cases making accessibility improvements. So we typically see projects like community centers, homeless shelters, senior centers that have a direct resident-facing service component. It does not serve just the offices of those nonprofits. It really has to be facilities where the public can come in and use those facilities. Next slide, please. So a typical project that you might see through the PFR program are accessibility improvements. We did have a round of funding through American Rescue Plan that was focused specifically on accessibility improvements, and the design for those is underway. We have those projects under contract, and as alluded to earlier, we initially helped those nonprofits to scope the projects before they came back in and asked for the money to actually move forward. And we thought that model worked really well, and I'll explain a bit going forward about how that will work and improve on some of the issues that the nonprofits have experienced. So any kind of hazardous conditions, if there are roof leaks or environmental concerns, the CDBG program does require an environmental review to ensure that there's no adverse effects for the users of the facility. So in some cases there may be remediation and bringing the facilities up to code, of course, per BCED. We see kitchens, bathrooms, roof replacements, entryways, things of that nature. So this diagram here, I'll talk through it because I realize the font may be a bit small, but this is sort of previously how the approval process worked for the PFR program. So we in HRD received and reviewed those applications, took them through a scoring and selection process. They would then go to this commission for review and approval, then to City Council for review and approval. And at that point, they would be under contract through a subrecipient agreement, which essentially makes them CDBG grantees. We are giving authority to those nonprofits to act as we would as a grantee. And there were several challenges for the nonprofits in taking the awards at this stage and moving forward with them. So that led to some of the delays that Director Schneider talked about, getting to the point where we could really execute the agreements and let them move forward with those funds. So these are some of the issues here. So the first is that when the projects would be coming to this commission for approval, oftentimes, because of the limited capacity and experience of the nonprofits, they're public service providers. They're not necessarily developers or contractors. So the proposals that they would apply with were lacking in detail and sometimes accurate budget figures. And so what this commission was seeing was not always how the project would end up after they had gone through a more detailed budgeting and scoping process. And those nonprofits, having received approval from City Council, would then be in a position where, as we were trying to get closer to having an agreement executed and being able to move forward, they were unable to do some of those components like environmental review because they didn't have the funding up front for that pre-development work. And so that would lead to those long delays that we spoke about, and that CDBG would be committed, and we're accountable to HUD for spending it in a timely manner. And so that's where we would see years go by before the funds were actually going out the door, because we had awarded it before they were really ready to move forward. Yes, please. So the proposed changes to this process are really in an effort to address some of those challenges that I talked about on the previous slide. So we as HRD would be working through a competitive procurement process in partnership with the Office of Contracting and Procurement to review, score, and competitively select projects for pre-development. So nonprofits would apply and say, we want to improve our facility. This is our idea of what we would like to do, but knowing that they would need some funding to actually move forward with design, environmental review, and pricing from a general contractor. So we would be considering them through that process for pre-development awards of up to $50,000. Then they would go forth with that pre-development. At that point, we would come back and review a more accurate, detailed budget and scope and environmental review. And at that point, the projects would be considered a bit more fully baked and ready to present to CPC staff for review, and then to the commission, and then ultimately to City Council. So we would have pre-development agreements that are then modified down the road with a budget and scope that have been vetted and that the nonprofits were able to move forward with. So there's on the next slide, a diagram that shows now sort of a two-part process. The first being the pre-development phase, whereby we are reviewing and scoring those applications for pre-development funds. They would still be going to City Council for approval, but not before the commission, knowing that the projects that you would be seeing at that time would not have and did not historically have really the right level of detail to know what is going to be happening at those facilities. We'd really be entering into agreements to help the nonprofits to scope out a project that could then be brought forward in the development phase. So at that point, yes, they would have the funding to move forward and do those design and cost estimating pieces of pre-development. And then in the construction phase, when the nonprofits were ready and had that work complete, they would bring back to us the updated scope and budget. We would review those against a set of criteria to determine if the projects were ready to proceed. And we're within the range of where they estimated the scope of the project would be. We would review those recommendations with staff and then follow the same process we saw before, coming to the commission with a clearer concept for the project, and then again to City Council and modifying those agreements to add the real amount of construction funds as opposed to sort of an estimated guess for sort of what the budget of the project would be. And the important piece of that too is that we're not committing CDBG to something that is sort of unknown and a bit tenuous, is that we're committing for pre-development. We know that they have the capacity to execute that, and then we would come back and commit CDBG for the construction when the projects were ready. And I believe that was the last slide. So thank you, and happy to answer questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming forward this evening and putting this presentation together. And I also want to thank this steering committee on committees for just putting in the additional time and effort to kind of work through this process, and then commend you just for working with us and bringing this forward. So thank you. Commissioners, do we have any fellow questioners? Commissioner Lewis, did you want to maybe kick us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this is an excellent opportunity for Detroit's residents to actually experience completed developments of this nature. I think that HRD and Director Schneider is absolutely correct in that oftentimes these entities are focused on what they do. child care or whatever it is, and they may not have the needed background experience in development and may not have a clear understanding of the future of the development or what's needed at the time. When it was presented to us, we looked at the $50,000 and we talked about that a little bit, and Director Snyder did explain to me that that's what her department does, oversee those funds and ensure that those funds are being used in a manner that will result in some sort of benefit to the residents of Detroit. I only have one thing that I would ask, and that was all, two things actually, that CPC is very much a part of the process. The CPC staff would have input, and the second thing that came up is that I would like Director Schneider, if it were possible, that in your vetting process, that there is assurance that the entities that are being subsidized to the extent with the 50,000 are entities that would not otherwise have the capacity to do it.
Through the chair, I think that that's certainly a fair request. I think I've worked for multiple different kinds of nonprofits in my career. I've worked for very large nonprofits and I've worked for small nonprofits. Their ability to handle the scope of these projects were very different, and I think that part of the reason why we're proposing this is that what we were seeing, and if you look at the history of who's received PFR, you see a lot of patterns. You see the same entities receiving the funds, and in part that was because they had more capacity to apply. And there's many other organizations that need this assistance, and so that's to your question, like that's part of our motivation behind why we think that this is a more suitable approach for the range of nonprofits in the city. And so, yeah, we can make that commitment. We have to do a financial risk analysis at the beginning, and so applicants will have to submit that information for us to better understand their financial capacity at that time.
Thank you, Director Snyder. And I would just ask this commission to approve Director Snyder's request. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Esparza.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I love the fact that we're looking to maximize and realistically find ways to practically benefit and use these public dollars through this process. So very much appreciate your effort and look forward to the success of this moving forward. Curious as to whether there's been any discussion or consideration or thought about maybe some further assistance that the city could provide, and that is permit fees. Any opportunity where there could be some assistance with some relief there or discounting of permit fees?
Yeah. Through the chair, thank you for the question. I'd like to confirm, and I'm happy to follow up. I believe that those uses would be eligible under the dollars that we award through the program, but we can confirm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Esparza. Vice Chair, you good?
I'm good.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to apologize to begin with because I'm a little slow, and I want to make sure I understand, and I'm going to reference what I remember in the past and to see how it changes from what you're proposing. And in the past, I remember that there was a CRC committee, and it was citizens that went out and evaluated all of these people. And one of the other things I remember is that they tried to give it out to a lot of people, and they had trouble spending the money. So a lot of times it would come back and then have to go to HUD. And, but I thought that part of what was good in the past was that we started focusing on what each one of those nonprofits, the area that they were focusing on. It was a big deal. Well, what are you impacting? What's your area? And then, then everybody wanted, when we went to the districts, it was, we needed a chart that showed the who in which district was getting something, and that's they broke out that sheet, and then also I remember that there was a lot of effort because it was, at least in my mind, it was for smaller, or they wanted to encourage smaller nonprofits, and that they went through a lot of trouble in training those, right, how to fill this out, how to do that. And maybe I'm just not understanding what you're proposing, but it seems like I think the CPC was involved in kind of ensuring that, we always throw that term public engagement around, and now we're pushed to the end of that review. And so what I'm speaking about, what I thought was good in the past, how is that still being taken care of? And I'm sorry for all the long babbling.
So, through the chair to Commissioner Russell, so some of the items you were talking about predates I've been with the city just short of 10 years, and some of the items you were talking about with the Citizens Review Council predates myself, but I believe Director Todd can speak to some of those things. So I want to be clear about one thing here. So the community development block grant dollars that have come before this commission have been kind of, three parts, or two parts, sorry. There's been the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which I believe is the more operational dollars with the smaller distribution of funds that sounds more familiar to me of the programs of 10 plus years ago, at least has been communicated to me, and probably when I was working for some of those smaller organizations when I was a bit younger. But so what the public facility rehab program has provided rehabilitation services for some of those organizations that were also receiving Neighborhood Opportunity Fund dollars. In the past, we were budgeting kind of like a straight $1 million a year, like in the last, between like 5 and 10 years ago, in part because the funding in the 90s, early 2000s was, we were getting $54 million a year, and now we're getting $34 million in, forget about inflation, right, in absolute dollars. So as a result of that, the dollar figures have been decreasing over time as the total size of the awards that we receive. So we haven't been able to serve as many public facilities with the rehabilitation dollars, I think, as we would like, as there's competing priorities with affordable housing, home repair, et cetera, right? So I believe, so if I could turn it over to Director Todd to talk more about some of the background and history.
Could I? And I think this is my fault. So what we're talking about, when we get those lists for the block grants, I'm just going to call it, you're specifically talking about just the physical improvement portion of that, not any of the others. So we're talking about that. And you're saying that because the money doesn't get spent because the projects weren't realistic or exactly possible as they described it?
Through the chair to Commissioner Russell, I think there were a couple of things, and so I that was one of my first. That 2021 hearing was like one of my very first hearings as the director of the department, and there were good questions that were being asked, and so I, at that time, and is more familiar with our housing development process, and when we come before council for housing development, we know that amount that we're asking council to award is the amount that's going to be needed for that project to move forward. But what became clear to me in that conversation is that the vetting that had been done and what we were asking for in applications, there's no way those organizations would have known all of that information. And there were instances where organizations were saying, will you provide us the funding to redo our bathrooms? And our inspectors would go in and say, like, yeah, we can redo this bathroom, but your roof is got a huge leak in it and it's leaking, and we would recommend you do your roof first. But the process that we had in place, when we came to you for an award and when we went to council for that award, say an organization was requesting $431,932. Don't ask me to repeat that number again, but it would go in the budget with that amount. So if they went to a contractor and the scope came back as $450,000, I would have to go back for a budget amendment and appropriation. And also I'd have to have whatever overages was available. And if that scope differed from what we had originally brought to you, because circumstances of the building were just different than what had been identified, like, we were kind of starting the process all over again. And so the answer is my very long answer to your question is yes, this is about the rehabilitation dollars, which have not been before this body since 2021. And so the idea is that when we do bring them before this body, we know, 2022. The pandemic, I think for all of us, it's hard to remember which year was when. But that we're not bringing you something that, like, I would imagine, if I was a commissioner, when I approved something, I would think that a project was going to happen. But unfortunately, that was not the case. And so we would prefer to be bringing things to this body that you're evaluating based on the merits that it's going to move forward, and we can be straightforward and believe that that's going to happen within a short period of time. So that is that time. Why that timing is such that it is that it actually would be similar to, in some ways, as to, like, we would still be bringing the construction awards to you as we were in the past. It's just that now that we have much more confidence that the construction awards were going to lead to a project shortly thereafter.
Through the chair. So I believe, Commissioner Russell, you were beginning to modify your own perspective as you were hearing Director Snyder's response. So I believe you started off maybe with the impression that we were dealing more with that larger issue of CRC that is yet to come back once the committee has dealt further with it in conjunction with HRD. So I think what you've heard Director Snyder say is, and again, some of you may remember, I do know that you were here, Commissioner Daniels was here, the chair, and I believe Mr. Esparza and Ms. Lewis, Commissioner Lewis, were here and engaged in this very healthy discussion. We won't mention particular groups or activities, but that is part and parcel of what has generated this. And certainly Director Snyder really took it to heart to say, we can do better with these PFR dollars for the city, for all concerned. So I guess narrowly construed, what she's saying is the PFR process becomes two phases now, because we want to make sure that the groups have the ability to really properly identify the work that needs to be done, and then thereby create a doable project. We need this pre-development stage, as opposed to what we used to do, again, in the past, and you were right. The CRC and the commission used to get the public service applications as well as these PFR applications, all together, and review them all and weigh in and have commentary. And depending upon, each project would vary in terms of its scope, its accuracy, its credibility, because of the varied capacity and really the lack of capacity that these groups have. But it was the city's effort to try to respond to what was proposed. So now we're baking in greater assurance. We give pre-development dollars in order to really investigate feasibility, and assess what can and needs to be done, and then develop a project around that. And then that second phase would be back to what, the commission is more or less used to. That would then come before you, whereas, again, these pre-development dollars would just be awarded. There's really no project to review at that point. So we would award the pre-development dollars in order to allow the group to go forward and do the assessment. Once that's done and the project is created, then that would come back to you in the traditional route, the more recent traditional route, without a CRC at this point, but where the commission would have review and make recommendation to city council, as you have in the past, of an actual project as opposed to just a pre-development work.
Okay. And I don't want to, so I just kind of want to repeat this back to make sure I'm understanding. When a group is getting ready to apply, they would apply at the same time, and based on their application, you guys would make an assessment and select those for picture, and then do the pre-development, and then go. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair. So we would evaluate really on capacity and need based on what they could produce. If a nonprofit did apply with a full capital needs assessment and a budget and trade payment breakdown prepared by a licensed contractor, and it was ready to go, in that case, we may determine that the project is actually ready to bring to CPC for a construction award. But the history and the, I won't say quality, but just the level of detail in the applications that we typically receive, they're just not ready for that. But it would be an option depending on the level of detail the nonprofit is able to provide at application.
Right, and I think it's a fabulous concept to then be able to assist that into formulating something that a contractor can actually execute. But I'm still confused as to how they get in that process in the beginning.
Yeah, so through the chair, the nonprofits will apply through what we hope will be annual now, notice of funding availability that we put out through a competitive process that is managed in coordination with OCP. And we
OCP.
The Office of Contracting and Procurement, forgive me.
Thank you.
The acronyms. And that they work with us to sort of design the request that we put out and ensure that it aligns with all of the requirements for awarding federal dollars. And that they have to be done in specific ways. There are certain attachments and submissions that we need the nonprofits to apply with. So they complete that package. That allows us to do a review of their capacity, both organizationally and financially. We do need them to be able to deliver the projects. We certainly don't want to award dollars that will ultimately not be able to result in a project. But we're not really at that time putting as much weight on evaluating the project itself. It's really on the nonprofit ensuring that they are aligned with the goals of the program, that it's an eligible activity under CDBG, and that we believe they have the capacity to do the pre-development and get to a place where they can submit a proposal for a construction project.
Okay. And so some groups might not be at that point, and they may need assistance in getting at that point, and that's what you guys are doing. But as they apply, is there some training that would help smaller nonprofits get to that point where they can be competitive that you guys provide?
I can answer through the chair to Commissioner Russell, and you may have more to add, Director Schneider, but one of the eligible pre-development costs or uses of those funds under the $50,000 would be an owner's rep to work with the nonprofits to help them navigate the process. So that's one thing that the nonprofits could take advantage of if, and we may recommend that if we see that they're, a little bit lost even approaching pre-development.
Through the chair to Commissioner Russell, I would add that we have several staff members within the department who focus on this work. That's the kind of what their job is to help cultivate, build a pipeline, work with nonprofits to get their projects moving and funded, make sure they're operating within the community development block grant rules that we have. And so it's a regular part of our process whenever we're creating the opportunity for nonprofits to apply for funding, to prior to that doing trainings about what's going to be required in the application, what level of detail is necessary in order to submit a successful application, and have through other programs provided workshops. And I think that that would be appropriate here as we relaunch the program. Is something that we can do with our staff that we have, if that is what you were asking.
And then would this specific category, would the date be ahead of the submission date be ahead of the others?
Could you clarify your question?
So and this is just for PFR, would, and say everything's due at June, would, if PFR, because we're going through this extra process, would they be due in May or April? Is it out in front of that so that it all runs in the same timeline?
So, well, through the chair, the PFR program is right now, we've released a NOFA earlier in sort of late winter, early spring, and I think that timeline would allow us to be hopefully bringing pre-development awards sometime in the middle of the year.
If I can, through the chair to Commissioner Russell, the pre-development process takes anywhere from 6 months to a year. So an environmental review takes a considerable amount of time. 6 months would be on the side of things are everything is
perfect.
Well, doesn't need a phase 2, doesn't need soil boring, sampling, those sorts of things. When you get into that, you're really talking about a year. And so that is where the bulk of the timeline is. So we would really be working quite far, like with the pre-development awards, we'd be working probably a year ahead of when, by the time, like when we brought construction awards to you, we would probably have been working with those projects for 6 months to a year. The other thing I haven't mentioned is that one of the other challenges that we've had in the past is that when we budget very early on in the process, and I assign I put in a number based on a number of factors, right? But if I don't know who's applying and how much their projects are going to cost, the number I'm putting into the budget is not based on the projects that are actually going to start construction within that year. So by working ahead, by the time we actually get to a budgeting process, we're much more likely to be able to say, in order to do these 3 projects that are likely to start construction next fiscal year, I'm going to need X dollars. and that would be in our budget, and so we'd be able to probably more fully award more projects than we are today, or have done in the past.
Thank you for answering my questions. And I'd just like to make a request, because I think part of it is I'm a little, my perception of what the process actually is, and I need a little re-education on that. And if the staff could help me out with that and provide maybe something simple, easy to follow of that process, because I don't want to tie them up and I'm asking questions that really are out of sequence, okay? If that could happen.
Through the chair, would be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Russell. And then I'll echo, if we're changing the process, something to help guide people through this new process graphically would be helpful. Mr. Gulak, I saw your hand up. I didn't forget about you. It's a lot of conversation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Chris Gulak, CPC staff. My main question was really answered, was about the timing for the budget. Yeah, and I think Director Snyder answered it, where you could fund a pool. Say you get 10 applicants, and then HRD, I think, just walking it through, I think say you get 10 applicants, HRD might pick 5, and then if they want to eventually fund them a year later, then they might have a new allocation for that fiscal year to fund those groups. I think, and my question was for Director Snyder, if that's how it would work in terms of timing.
Through the chair to Mr. Gulak. I mean, I think that's generally right. We want to the greatest extent possible, we need to be spending money in the fiscal year within which it's budgeted. So knowing the true scope of projects during the budgeting process that are likely to start construction within the next fiscal year would allow us to assign the right budget amount in the budget process to be able to get those projects started and moving based on the completed scope. And so yes, I mean, part of this is designed to make sure that we can continue to improve at spending money within the fiscal year within which it's budgeted. Construction projects have long lead times, so in order to accommodate those long lead times, I need more information during the budgeting process, and this revised process would allow us to have that information.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way I understand this is companies step forward to do some sort of renovation to a building, which requires construction. Before construction can begin, certain things need to be done. An architect needs to take a look at the building, whatever it is, to determine structurally, etc. Maybe some environmental is required. And then you need a competent contractor to come in and actually do the work. The entities that have come forward oftentimes are receiving the NOFA funds for the service that they are providing, and then they want, I think, the PFR funds for the actual renovation or repair that they need. And so what this does is gives HRD the opportunity to vet that entity prior to bringing it to us to provide that pre-development service, that architectural service, that engineering or environmental service, and that helping them select a competent contractor so that they will have actual numbers in terms of what that renovation will require. What has happened in the past is they come before us, and I recall my own questions. The questions were such that, okay, you have this entity before us, but we don't know how much money are we getting ready to spend? And the answer wasn't there because the homework wasn't done. So what they're asking us is to allow them to go and do the homework get all of that information together so that when they come before this commission, they have a real deal. They can say, this deal is ready to go at $100,000. So in terms of, for me, getting into the weeds of what HRD does on a daily basis, I leave that up to them. What I do know is, based on the conversations that the committee has had with HRD, when they come to us, they'll have a doable deal, one that we can say yay or nay on based on something other than dollars. Or it'll be the CDBG funds that we're voting on. But we can say yay or nay based on the project, and if we were to vote yes on that project, we can be assured that that building is, whatever it is going to happen. So I just wanted to kind of capsulize the conversation and help my colleagues understand why I think we should move this forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Vice Chair?
I think this is a fabulous idea. I've seen this so much in my work with CDBG funding or even any grant funding where you need to do, architectural investigation. Maybe it's roof, maybe it's structural stability, for a building. And sometimes you get a grant for however much money, and then you find out that you need a lot more to make it happen. And this is really common. So separating like this really ensures that the applicant knows what they're dealing with, that we know what we're dealing with, and that we don't have to double back and go back to change that amount. I'm in full support of this. It makes all the sense in the world. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'll also echo many of my fellow commissioners' sentiments. Just maybe one or two questions. If this is to go forward, timing-wise, what kind of needs to get done for this to be implemented in time for 2026? I think are we on track to implement 26, or are we looking at implementing in 27?
To the chair, yes. We would anticipate that we would have some projects ready with pre-development work completed in fiscal year 26.
In 26, okay. And I apologize.
Sorry, in 2020, in 2026.
In 2020.
Calendar year. Thank you.
Through the chair, we believe we'll have some pre-development projects completed in order to inform the budget, the next budget process.
So they'll be able to go into pre-development soon, and then that'll guide them through the summer and fall, and then next spring, around when the NOFA goes back up, then they'd apply, and then they'd be in the running competitively. Did I get that timing right?
Yes, to the chair. That would be the timing, is that we would expect them to have the pre-development work completed around that time. Some may take longer than others, depending on the scope of the project. We would not be asking them to come in and reapply with all of that same documentation. At that time, we would really just be looking at the heart of the project and the scope and budget they've created.
Okay. And a few minor questions. I apologize if I'm asking a question that came out already. The funding source for the pre-development, where does that come from?
To the chair, that would also be CDBG.
That's awesome. That's just pre-set aside and kind of already allocated for that. Okay. And then timeline. I think that's good. So I'm good with all my questions. Commissioners, Commissioner Daniels.
All right, Mr. Chair, I move approval of this item.
All right.
I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. Let's do Director Talk. Can we do a roll call just for good measure?
Want to ask for discussion? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Is there room for discussion? Is there any further discussion? I see none. Let's get to it. Whenever you're ready.
Roll call has been requested. Commissioner Daniels?
Yes.
Commissioner Esparza? Support. Commissioner Lewis?
Support.
Commissioner Markowitz?
Yay.
Commissioner Russell?
Support.
Mr. Chair?
Support.
Commissioner Udabi?
Support.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner's motion passes.
All right. Thank you. And if you could just close us out with some next steps and what we can expect.
To the chair, and I'll ask Ms. LeBeau to add here, is I think that there was a request for a flow chart, so I think we would get that to you. Well, it's Thursday, so not this week, but I think it's something we can get to you next week.
Okay. Yeah.
And then as far as the process in terms of the actual pre-development work.
Yes, we would expect to begin on some pre-development awards towards the end of this year and get projects engaged in that work and ready to put something together that is ready to bring to this commission. So I don't expect that we would have in the near future projects that are really ready for construction funding, but that will probably be in about a year's time if we can move on the timeline that we're looking at now.
Okay. So we can expect to see you possibly in a year. Okay.
I believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on through our agenda. We did modify our agenda at the beginning of the meeting to remove our single unfinished business item. So we will continue. Director Todd, do we have any new business?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there's none.
Okay. Director Todd, do we have any staff reports?
Mr. Chair, there is no formal staff report. We had originally, with respect to the line item that was removed, if there were any questions with regard to that, we would be happy to take them at this time, but we will otherwise forego the staff report.
Is this garden bug on Davidson?
Yes.
Okay. Did commissioners, if they have any questions regarding this garden bug item that we tabled or we moved from the agenda? Thank you, Vice Chair. I breezed right past public comment. Okay. So we'll go ahead and close staff reports. If there are no further staff reports, Director Todd.
That's
and if
correct.
we can go and open up public comment. This is the portion of the agenda where the public can provide input and comment on items on the agenda or general questions they may have of the commission or staff in general. So we'll go ahead and open the public comment. If you are here in the audience and you want to participate, you can express your desire to do so by getting staff a comment card, and then they'll get that to the front. Or if you are attending virtually and want to participate, you can raise your hand within the Zoom platform, and then you'll be acknowledged and brought over to the panel side of the presentation. Ms. Swed, will you be assisting this evening?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do we have any in-person comment cards for the public comment portion?
Mr. Chair, we do not.
All right. Do we have any virtual hands raised for public comment?
Mr. Chair, we do not.
Okay.
I am so sorry. Actually, one hand was just raised.
Okay. Let's bring that one hand over.
Okay. And it's John Bolt, and they should be able to speak now.
Good evening.
Evening. Yeah, I just have a question. I know the city's going through the process of rezoning. I'm wondering if you guys have looked at what Minneapolis has done. They've pretty much just completely gotten rid of single-family zoning. It's led to decreases in rent there. Yeah, just wondering if that's something that's been looked at all and kind of what you're considering on that front.
Thank you. Ms. Swed, do we have any other hands?
Mr. Chair, we do not.
Okay. With that, I will close the public comment. Director Todd, did you want to acknowledge the question of the individual?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. With regard to the question, yes, this is something that we have been looking at as part of Zone Detroit, and we are keenly aware of what cities like Minneapolis have done and the factors that are involved. we're also recognizing that in the city of Detroit, we've had some slightly different factors that created the conditions that those changes addressed. But nonetheless, the answer to the question is yes, we're definitely looking at changes to the R1 and the R2 in order to bring greater diversity in terms of housing type, as well as broader land use in order to make those districts more viable, both from the residents or property owners' perspective, as well as potential development, and of course from city government's perspective. So that will be part and parcel of items that will be coming before this commission over the course of the next 2 years.
All right. Thank you, Director Todd. All right. Next, we have, so that concludes our public comment. Next, we have member reports. I think we have one member report at least. Go right ahead. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to address CPC staff and my colleagues and also the public. It is a bittersweet day for me, a little sad day for me, because this is my last City Planning Commission meeting as a vice chair and a commissioner. I'm really sad. I've been serving on the commission a little over 3 years, and I just wanted to say that it has been just a deep honor to work with this staff in this commission. All of you are so dedicated and thoughtful about everything that you do. The attendance and engagement of everyone here speaks to just how passionate you are about improving the lives of Detroiters. And it's been an honor to work with all of you. You will see me. I will be diligently working in my new role in Midtown and New Center, so I will definitely be coming before this body for a variety of reasons. I will continue to be active. You will hear from me often. I tried my best to make my new role and serving on this commission work, but ultimately it is in the best interest of City Planning Commission, the city, the public, Midtown Detroit Inc., and myself that we really have a clear separation of duties and interests. And again, I have loved serving on this commission. It has just been so wonderful. So I have not been looking forward to this day. But, it's certainly with gratitude and thankfulness that I leave this body in this role. Thank you so much, all of you. And to staff, oh my God, you're the best. You provide answers to absolutely everything, and you're so thoughtful. It's just been a joy to work with you. So thanks. You rule. Thanks, everybody.
Well, if I may just add, I've personally appreciated you as a member of the commission since you joined, and your presence as a vice chair, I felt, has brought a lot to the board. I think we all have various aspects and characteristics and individual values that we all bring to the commission, and it shows in the questions we ask and how we treat applicants and things like that. So, and all that is very evident in your presence and how you interact with the commission and the public. So again, you will be truly missed, and I appreciate you and thank you for spending your time with us over these past 3 years.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Director Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echo the sentiments of the commission. Dr. Bolger and I, being somewhat familiar with Ms. Markowitz in her former role, and being able to engage with her on a couple of downtown issues, and then lo and behold, finding out that once the seat was vacated, that she was in fact someone who was being considered by the council president for nomination for this position. We were all the more enthused. And of course, we have been blown away by what she's been able to bring to the table. This has been certainly one of the greatest compilations of commission members that I have seen in my almost 35 years with the city, and greatly appreciate all of you. Indeed, she will be missed, but happy she will be around, still be around. The one thing I guess I will offer because of commission's concerns or even the public, Commissioner Markowitz did go through the steps to have her position and potential conflicts of interest addressed. In fact, just want to state for the record that the Board of Ethics did authorize it. She is recognizing on her own the potential conflicts, but more importantly, the amount of work that would, while she might clearly have to recuse herself on occasion, the amount of work that she's looking at, she probably wouldn't be here because of all of the conflicts and the competition for her time. So again, she will be greatly missed, but again, not far away and still participating through this new role in the building up of this city. But again, I just wanted to make it clear to anyone who was thinking about it, Board of Ethics said it was okay. But this is her recognizing from a realistic standpoint that there could be problems that would not be to the benefit of the commission. We certainly respect that as staff, but we wish it weren't so.
Thank you, Director Todd. Commissioner Esparza.
Chairman, allow me the opportunity to say that I'm sad. I think Melanie Markowitz has been a great commissioner, great planner, a leader, very strong voice, and clearly an advocate, so you'll be greatly missed. Thank you.
You'll be around. So we get to still see you. It's not all bad. So yes, please invite us.
I absolutely will.
I'm going to hold you to it.
No, I will do it.
I'm going to hold you to it.
Like,
I don't know how it feels on this side to not be invited to things.
Absolutely. Also, I don't know if you knew, but like we throw some shindigs on occasion. Please come.
As long as ethics is okay with it, please. Yeah, right.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna miss you.
All right. Right. Yeah. As long as we're not the only one. That's right.
We'll be the chin and they can invite everybody else for the day.
That works. That works. All right. Next, we have communications. Director Todd, do we have any communications?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there are none at this time, but there will be a few to report out on once we've had a chance to review them at your next meeting.
Okay. Sounds good. So if there are no further items on our agenda or items for discussion, it is 7:31, and I will adjourn this meeting.